Would you believe me if I told you the man they mocked and discarded became the one signing their paychecks? It all started on a rainy Monday morning. It was a kind of day that made the city feel heavier, as if the weight of the sky itself pressed down on its streets. Inside the gleaming skyscraper of Eastwell Industries, a young man named Jordan Cole sat at his desk, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. Jordan had always been a hard worker, a small-town kid who had clawed his way up the corporate ladder. He believed in loyalty, perseverance, and the idea that if you worked hard enough, success would follow. He wasn't rich, far from it. His modest one-bedroom apartment had a leaky ceiling, and his bank account barely had enough to make it through the month. But he had ambition, and more than anything, he had faith in the company he had given 6 years of his life. But all it took was one moment, one cruel decision, to strip him of everything. As he sat in the meeting room, expecting to discuss an upcoming project, the tension in the air felt different. His boss, Gregory Stanton, sat across from him, flanked by 2 HR representatives. They had polite, almost rehearsed expressions, the kind that signaled bad news before a single word was spoken. "Jordan, we appreciate everything you've done for Eastwell Industries," Stanton said, steepling his fingers, "but we've decided to go in a different direction." Jordan blinked. A different direction? One of the HR representatives, a woman named Lisa, cleared her throat. "Your position has been made redundant." Redundant. The word rang in his ears like a death sentence. I don't understand. I just led the Harper deal. I closed that contract 2 weeks ago. We brought in millions. "And we appreciate that." Stanton cut him off, his tone sharp. "But business is business." Jordan swallowed hard. Is it business, or is this about the promotion I was promised? Silence. He knew the truth before anyone said it. That promotion had gone to Richard Calloway, the CEO's nephew, a man who barely worked, showed up late, and only closed deals when they were handed to him on a silver platter. Jordan had done the work. He had earned it, his hands clenched into fists. "So I get discarded? Just like that?" "You'll receive severance," Lisa said quickly, "and we're happy to provide a letter of recommendation." Jordan laughed bitterly. A recommendation from the same people who had just thrown him out like trash? He pushed his chair back and stood, forcing himself to breathe. His whole world had just collapsed in an instant as he walked out of the office. His co-workers avoided his gaze. The ones who had once praised his work now whispered behind his back. Even his so-called friends didn't offer a word of support. He realized painfully that in this world, loyalty was a lie. By the time he reached the elevator, his head was spinning, fired, humiliated. But if they thought this was the end of Jordan Cole, they were dead wrong. The weeks that followed were brutal. Jordan sent out dozens of resumes, only to be met with rejection after rejection. His savings dwindled, his bills piled up. He cut back on everything, eating only once a day, canceling his gym membership, even selling the watch his late father had given him just to make rent. One night, as he sat in his dark apartment, staring at the eviction notice on his table, he felt the weight of failure crash down on him. "This isn't fair," he muttered to himself. He had given everything to Eastwell, and now he was nothing. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the anger. Maybe it was the realization that no one was coming to save him. But for the first time in his life, he understood something. If he wanted success, he had to take it. Jordan didn't just want a new job. He wanted power. He spent hours in the public library, devouring books on business, finance, and strategy. He studied every successful entrepreneur, learning from their failures and victories alike. He took online courses, sharpening his skills, and mastering the world of investing in startups. But knowledge wasn't enough. He needed money. He took on freelance consulting work, helping small businesses grow their revenue. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough to keep him afloat. More importantly, it taught him something crucial: how businesses really worked. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. A struggling tech company called Nexus Dynamics was on the verge of collapse. Their CEO was desperate. Investors were pulling out. No one believed they could turn it around. No one except Jordan. He took a risk. Every last dollar he had, plus a small loan from a contact he had made during his consulting gigs, and bought a stake in the company. He worked day and night, restructuring their strategy, forging new partnerships, and leveraging his knowledge of corporate politics. And against all odds, Nexus didn't just survive. It thrived. Within 2 years, it became one of the fastest growing firms in the industry. And Jordan? He became a millionaire. But he wasn't done yet. There was still one more thing he needed to do. 3 years after the day Eastwell humiliated him, Jordan walked into the very building where he had once been fired. Only this time, he wasn't an employee. He was the new owner. Through a series of silent acquisitions, he had bought out controlling shares of Eastwell Industries. It had taken careful planning, precise timing, and a ruthless determination that the old Jordan never had. Now, as he sat at the head of the boardroom table, he watched the faces of his former bosses pale in realization. Gregory Stanton, the man who had once dismissed him without a second thought, looked visibly shaken. Jordan, Mr. Cole, Jordan corrected smoothly. I believe that's how you address Richard Calloway, isn't it? Stanton swallowed. This is a surprise. Jordan leaned forward. Not to me. The silence in the room was deafening. Jordan let them sweat for a moment before he spoke again. I built this company back up from the outside. Now I'll decide who stays and who goes. And as he looked at the very people who had once discarded him, he couldn't help but smile, because he wasn't just back, he was in control. Jordan Cole had finally done it. He had risen from the depths of poverty, betrayal, and humiliation to become the owner of Eastwell Industries. The very company that had discarded him like trash now belonged to him. But success, as he was about to learn, came with a cost he had never anticipated. The moment the ink dried on the acquisition papers, he became the enemy of powerful forces he never knew existed. Old money, corrupt businessmen, politicians with deep ties to Eastwell's former board members. People who had thrived under the old system and saw Jordan as a threat, and they were ready to destroy him. It started with whispers in the financial sector. They say he's not experienced enough to run a conglomerate. A fluke success. Nexus was a lucky break. He doesn't belong here. Then came the media attacks. Business magazines painted him as an arrogant upstart. Financial analysts questioned his credentials. Social media trolls flooded his accounts with racist undertones, claiming that a man like him, young, black, and from poverty, had no right to be at the helm of a billion-dollar company. Jordan had expected resistance, but the sheer scale of it was overwhelming. His employees, many of whom had been loyal to Stanton and the old guard, sabotaged deals and leaked confidential documents to the press. Investors who had once praised his genius were now second-guessing their faith in him. Then, the lawsuit started. It began with a simple contract dispute with a former supplier. Then another, and another. Before long, Jordan was buried under an avalanche of lawsuits, all claiming breach of contract, unfair dismissal, and unethical business practices. He knew what was happening. This wasn't about contracts or legality. This was war. A coordinated attack designed to bleed him dry financially and ruin his reputation. But the worst blow came when his own CFO, Thomas Briggs, the man he had trusted, turned against him. Jordan had brought Thomas in from Nexus, believing he would help stabilize Eastwell's finances. Instead, Thomas had been working with former board members to frame Jordan for financial misconduct. One evening, as Jordan sat in his penthouse office reviewing the company's financials, his lawyer, Vanessa Clark, burst in. "We have a problem." Jordan set down his glass of whiskey. "Which one? There's plenty to choose from." Vanessa's face was grave. "The SEC is investigating you for fraud." Jordan felt his stomach drop. "What?" "They're claiming you falsified earnings reports and manipulated stock prices." "That's insane." "I haven't." Vanessa slid a thick folder across the desk. "These documents say otherwise." Jordan opened it, and his breath caught in his throat. The numbers had been altered, transactions forged, and stock prices inflated. And every falsified record pointed directly to his name. His own CFO had betrayed him, and now he was facing a criminal investigation that could destroy everything. The media went into a frenzy. Disgraced CEO Jordan Cole under investigation for fraud. From rags to riches to ruin, the rise and fall of a Wall Street imposter. Investors pulled out, stocks plummeted. Overnight, he went from a billionaire visionary to a pariah. The government froze his accounts pending investigation. His assets, his penthouse, his cars, even the very company he fought to own, were on the line. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, the final betrayal came. His fiancée, Rachel, the woman who had stood by his side during his rise, walked out. "I can't do this, Jordan," she whispered as she packed her bags. Jordan stood in the doorway of their once luxurious apartment, now eerily empty. "You don't believe me?" She hesitated. "I don't know what to believe anymore." She left without another word. Days later, Jordan sat in a sterile courtroom, surrounded by lawyers and journalists eagerly awaiting his downfall. The prosecution presented the fabricated evidence, painting him as a ruthless, deceitful businessman who had manipulated the system for personal gain. His defense? Paper thin, without access to his frozen funds. His legal team had been crippled. Vanessa fought hard, but the case was stacked against them. The defendant knowingly engaged in fraudulent activities. The prosecutor's voice echoed through the courtroom, a crime punishable by years in federal prison. Jordan clenched his fists. He wanted to scream, to fight, to expose the truth. But in that moment, he saw the truth. The system wasn't just against him. It was designed to keep people like him out. As the judge prepared to speak, the room held its breath. The verdict was coming. Would he walk away free, or would he lose everything? Jordan Cole sat frozen as the judge's gavel hovered above the bench. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. His heart pounded against his ribcage, his mind racing through the events that had led to this moment. He had fought too hard and suffered too much to let it end like this. And yet, as the judge opened his mouth, Jordan braced himself for the inevitable. Due to inconsistencies in the evidence and an ongoing internal review, this court cannot proceed with sentencing at this time. The case against Mr. Cole is hereby suspended pending further investigation. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jordan exhaled sharply. He wasn't free, but he wasn't convicted either. The war was far from over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, microphones and cameras thrust in his face. His lawyer, Vanessa Clark, shielded him from the barrage of questions. "No comments," she repeated as they made their way to the waiting car. As soon as the doors shut, Jordan turned to her. "What just happened?" Vanessa smirked. "Someone's playing a different game." Later that night, Jordan sat alone in his penthouse, one of the few assets he still controlled. The city lights blinked below him, but his mind was elsewhere. How had the evidence against him suddenly become inconsistent? Who had tampered with it? And why? Then his phone buzzed. A blocked number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A deep, distorted voice responded. "If you want to win, stop looking at the evidence against you. Start looking at the evidence they didn't present." The line went dead. Jordan's pulse quickened. Was this a setup, a warning, or a lifeline? He called Vanessa immediately. "We need to go through every piece of evidence they didn't use in court." For the next week, Jordan and Vanessa pored over thousands of documents, old contracts, stock reports, financial records. It felt like searching for a ghost in a graveyard. Then, on the ninth night, Jordan found it. Buried in a pile of old acquisitions was a single contract, a seemingly unimportant merger document from 20 years ago. It outlined a clause stating that if Eastwell Industries ever faced internal fraud at the executive level, ownership of its controlling shares would default to a dormant trust fund until the fraud was resolved. Jordan's eyes widened. If the fraud accusations against him were valid, the company wouldn't revert to the old board. It wouldn't be liquidated. It would temporarily belong to this trust fund. And who controlled that trust fund? He quickly traced the paper trail. The answer hit him like a lightning bolt. His father. Jordan's father had abandoned him and his mother when he was a child. He had never known the man, never even spoken to him. The last thing he had heard was that he had worked at Eastwell before vanishing into obscurity. It seemed he had left behind something far more valuable than Jordan had ever imagined, a legal loophole that, if played correctly, could flip the entire case on its head. Before he could process his next move, Jordan received a message from an unknown number. "You're getting too close. Stop now or you'll regret it." His stomach tightened. Someone knew what he had found, and they were willing to silence him for it. Jordan stared at the merger document, his pulse hammering. He had spent weeks feeling like a pawn in someone else's game, but now he held a piece that could turn the board upside down. A clause buried in an old contract had given control of Eastwell Industries to a dormant trust in the event of internal fraud. And that trust? It belonged to his father, and a strange man Jordan had never met. Who else knew about this? And why was someone desperate enough to threaten him to keep it hidden? He took a deep breath. If someone was trying to bury this secret, that meant it had power, and power was something Jordan was ready to claim. He spent the next few days trying to track down his father. The man had disappeared years ago, leaving behind no public traces. But Jordan had money, less than before, but enough to find someone who didn't want to be found. Finally, his investigator came through. His father, Leonard Cole, was alive, and he was living in a small coastal town under a different name. Jordan wasted no time. He booked the next flight, his mind racing with questions. Why had his father abandoned him? Had he known what he left behind? And most importantly, would he help Jordan take back what was his? The house was small and unassuming. Jordan knocked, his breath shallow. The door opened, revealing an older man with sharp eyes and a weathered face. Leonard Cole. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then the man sighed. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Inside, over a pot of black coffee, Leonard explained everything. He had worked at Eastwell Industries decades ago, but when he uncovered corporate fraud, he was forced out, paid to disappear. Instead of taking the money and running, he had inserted a hidden clause into the merger agreement, ensuring that if Eastwell ever fell into corruption again, its ownership would temporarily default to a trust in his name. "Why didn't you ever use it?" Jordan asked. Leonard let out a bitter laugh. "I had no power. The moment I tried, I'd be silenced." Jordan clenched his fists, but he wasn't powerless. Not anymore. His father's mistake had been hiding in the shadows. Jordan planned to do the opposite. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Jordan went back to the city and hired an elite team of lawyers. If Eastwell had committed fraud at the executive level, which they had by framing him, then by their own contract, the company belonged to the trust, to him. But before he could make a move, another message arrived. "Drop this now. This is bigger than you think." Who was trying to stop him? And what did they know that he didn't? Jordan read the message again, his grip tightening around his phone. Someone wanted him to stop, but he wasn't about to back down. Not when he was this close to flipping the script. If they thought a simple threat could scare him off, they didn't know who they were dealing with. He met with his legal team the next morning. "We're moving forward," he announced, his voice firm. "Find me everything, every discrepancy, every illegal transaction, every piece of dirt on Eastwell Industries. If they want to play dirty, we'll bury them with the truth." His lawyers got to work. Within days, they uncovered a chain of fraudulent activities, offshore accounts, embezzlement, and even proof that his own termination had been orchestrated to remove him before he could expose their crimes. Jordan now had the ammunition he needed, but he knew that legal battles took time, and time was a luxury he couldn't afford. So he took a different approach. He reached out to investigative journalists, the kind who thrived on corporate scandals. He leaked just enough to spark curiosity, but not enough to give Eastwell's executives time to cover their tracks. The next morning, headlines exploded. Whistleblower reveals shocking fraud at major corporation. CEO of Eastwell accused of embezzling millions. The company's stock plummeted. Investors panicked. Employees demanded answers. And Jordan? He was just getting started. As the board scrambled to contain the fallout, Jordan made his next move, a hostile takeover. Using the contract clause his father had hidden, he legally claimed majority control of Eastwell Industries. The board had no choice but to meet with him. The moment he walked into that boardroom, the same room where they had humiliated and fired him, was a moment of poetic justice. The CEO, the same man who had laughed in his face months ago, looked pale. "This is a mistake," he muttered. You don't have experience to run this company." Jordan leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "Funny, I was qualified enough to build it from the ground up before you decided to stab me in the back." The room fell silent. He didn't stop there. He had uncovered one last piece of information, something even more damning than fraud. The CEO had been selling company secrets to a foreign competitor. Jordan slid a folder across the table. This is your resignation letter. Sign it now or I take this to the authorities." The man's hands trembled as he picked up the pen. One by one, the corrupt executives fell like dominoes. And just like that, Jordan was in charge. As he sat in his new office, taking the view, he received another message. "You think you've won? This was just the beginning." Jordan's victory had made him enemies who weren't done with him yet. Jordan Carter stood at the top floor of Eastwell Industries, gazing down at the city skyline. Just months ago, he had walked out of this building humiliated, broken, and uncertain about his future. Now he owned it. The media hailed him as a comeback king, the man who turned his downfall into a multi-million-dollar empire. His calculated financial moves and strategic alliances had not only exposed corruption, but also positioned him as one of the most powerful businessmen in the industry. Yet he wasn't done. Jordan knew that true power wasn't just about revenge. It was about building something greater. He called a press conference. The world was watching. Months ago, I was just another employee. I worked hard, gave my all, and was still discarded like nothing. But here's the thing about resilience. You can't break a person who refuses to stay down. The cameras flashed as he continued. To every person who has ever been underestimated, undervalued, or betrayed, this is for you. Eastwell is no longer run by corruption. It's run by people who believe in real innovation, real integrity, and real success. Then, he made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the business world. "I am restructuring Eastwell Industries into Carter Global Holdings." With that, he revealed his latest acquisitions, a tech company, a real estate empire, and a media conglomerate. He wasn't just taking over a single company. He was building a dynasty. Jordan didn't just rely on luck. He played the game differently. Diversification. He spread his wealth across multiple industries, ensuring financial stability. Leverage. He used legal loopholes, insider knowledge, and strategic partnerships to outmaneuver his enemies. Control. He never let emotions dictate his decisions. Every move was calculated for maximum impact. He had mastered the art of turning setbacks into stepping stones. But not everyone celebrated his victory. That night, a letter was delivered to his office. "You've made powerful enemies. You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." Jordan smirked as he read it. He had expected this. Power came with enemies, but he wasn't afraid. He welcomed the challenge. To everyone watching his story unfold, Jordan had a message. Your failures do not define you. Your response to them does. Wealth isn't just about money. It's about knowledge, strategy, and resilience. As the credits rolled, he turned to the camera with one final challenge. What would you do if you had nothing left to lose? Jordan Carter had built an empire, but he knew true success wasn't just about power. It was about legacy. The letter warning him of unseen enemies didn't rattle him. If anything, it reminded him that power always attracted opposition. But this time, he wouldn't be blindsided. He gathered his top advisors, reviewed every financial and legal loophole, and ensured that Carter Global Holdings was untouchable. Every deal, every acquisition, every move had been executed with precision. His empire was built on strategy, not shortcuts. A week later, Jordan walked into the boardroom of Eastwell Industries for the final time. The same executives who once humiliated him now sat before him, defeated. "Gentlemen, this is your official notice. Your time is up." They had tried to sabotage him, but he had anticipated their every move. Their corrupt dealings had been exposed to regulators, their offshore accounts seized, and their influence erased. Jordan didn't just take back what was his. He ensured that no one could ever use the system against people like him again. With Eastwell fully integrated into Carter Global Holdings, Jordan turned his focus toward the future. His company wasn't just about profits. It was about creating opportunities for those who had been overlooked, just like he once was. He launched initiatives to support young entrepreneurs, minority-owned businesses, and innovative startups. He didn't just want to be rich. He wanted to change the game. One evening, as he stood on the rooftop of his penthouse, overlooking the city, he reflected on everything that had led him to this moment. The betrayal, the humiliation, the struggle. Every setback had shaped him into the man he is today. He smiled, knowing that no matter who tried to bring him down next, he was always 10 steps ahead. As the world watched his meteoric rise, one thing became clear. Jordan Carter wasn't just a success story. He was a revolution. To everyone who had followed his journey, his last words were simple. Never let them write your ending. Take the pen and do it yourself. With that, his story came to a close. But for Jordan Carter, the real story was just beginning.